Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Side to Side Sportscast, where it's your boys, Will, Woody, and CJ, and we come to break it down from the court side, the ring side, the sidelines, and for them sports they play outdoors, we outside, we side to side. That's how we ride. And we are entering the final week of the NFL season, which means your fantasy football championships should be concluded unless you play in one of those whack leagues that end on the most whack week. But speaking of how we ride, it's been one heck of a ride through fantasy football this year. So let's talk about some of the awards. We're going to hand out our side-to-side fantasy football awards for the 2021 season, and we just want to take a special moment to shout out our main man, John Madden. May you rest in peace, and we just thank you for all you've contributed to the NFL as a coach, as a broadcaster, and as an elite video game maker. And we hope they get their act together. That's my personal opinion in your legacy. But let's get into the awards now. Fantasy football awards. Fellas, if you had to give a most valuable fantasy player an MVP, who would it be?
This is an easy one for me. I'm taking Jonathan Taylor. He just blew it up this year. I mean, week after week, it was just 20 plus for him. He was the focal point of that offense all year. Never wavered. He's my fantasy MVP. The only person, I shouldn't say the only person that I considered, but my runner-up was Travis Kelce. I like him specifically because of the position. He just outperforms everybody. It's a huge piece of the puzzle. If you can get that many points out of your tight end slot, you're going to end up outperforming a lot of teams, especially if you're in head-to-head, in the weekly challenge. So, those are my two, but I have to give Jonathan Taylor the crown.
Well, unlike the NFL MVP award, the fantasy MVP award, I feel like a lot of times should belong to a non-QB. When you look at the highest fantasy scorers, though, like literally every year, the majority are quarterbacks, right? Because, quarterbacks, they get 20 points a game. If they're better than that, then some of them get 25. If they are Derek Carr, they might get 9, then they might get 23. And if they're Zach Wilson, they get 4. But anyway, if you look at that top 10 of the fantasy scorers, there's only one person on that list that's not a QB, and that person is my pick for the fantasy football MVP. And it happens to also be CJ's pick. That is Jonathan Taylor. He's had a great year behind that O-line. He's done a terrific job proving the naysayers wrong. The next non-QB on that list doesn't appear until number 14. And we'll be talking about him in just a little bit of time. But, I would say Jonathan Taylor. If you want to go with the number one, scorer, then I believe that's Josh Allen. But, QB, that's it's a tight thing. You don't know, it doesn't really matter too much if you had Josh Allen versus Tom Brady this year. Well, it definitely mattered if you had Jonathan Taylor versus any other running back in the league.
You got 2 running back slots to fill. So, yeah.
Hey, you fellas have some very interesting takes, and it is hard to argue against Jonathan Taylor because Jonathan Taylor had an incredible fantasy football year, and he was drafted consistently in the first round throughout many leagues. Anywhere from 5 to 12. He was usually going. And at the beginning of the year, I thought 5 was too early for him, but boy, was I wrong. Jonathan Taylor, and a lot of people thought that, Jonathan Taylor absolutely destroyed it. But I'm going to go with the flip side, inside out take of Woody's take. The NFL MVP is typically always a quarterback because you kind of need a quarterback at least a serviceable or decent quarterback if your team wants to be in contention. In fantasy football, we always recognize it as you need those running backs because, there's 2 slots to fill and teams are going to be drafting them. And the fact that the supply doesn't meet the demand, everybody takes running backs like early. That's why they go off the board. There's a lot of receivers and quarterback. I mean, you're probably in a 10 to 12 team league. A lot of people wait on quarterbacks because you usually are trusting that you'll get someone that you can rely on. So you wait until the later rounds. But if you're really smart, quarterback, because they are the highest scorers, I feel like should get recognized a lot more as value in fantasy football. So when I pick my fantasy football MVP this year, I'm absolutely going to give it to Josh Allen. And here's why. Because we're 17 weeks behind us in the season, and he's thrown for just under 42 yards, 35 touchdowns, 700 yards rushing, and another 6 rushing touchdowns. If you have that player on your team, let's say you took Josh Allen at the end of the first round or somewhere in the second round, you're getting a consistent 30-plus points from your quarterback every single week, 30 to 40 points. That can make up for that running back that only gets you 6 or 7 points, or those receivers that get you maybe 5 catches, 75 yards, and no touchdowns. I really feel like people miss the mark on quarterbacks, and there's only a couple of them that put up elite production like Josh Allen right now. And my MVP is Josh Allen. And I would say next year, when you get ready to do your draft, value the elite quarterback more, and you will find yourself alive at the end of the season.
That's why I cannot wait to do this side-to-side fantasy football league, because that is outrageous. That is one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard in my entire life. And I'll tell you something, Jonathan Taylor, right? We said that he's the only person in the top 10. The next best running back is Austin Eckler. All right. How many less points in a half-point PPR league did Austin Eckler have compared to Jonathan Taylor? He had 80 less points. That's number 1 to number 2 is the drop-off. 80 points. If you go through QBs and you go from Josh Allen and subtract 80, there are 9 other QBs that fall in that range. So it's not worth sacrificing 80 points if you can get a Tom had how many less? 30 less? Or, any of those guys that are within that 80 range, because the drop-off is steep in running backs. That's why it matters. Because if you get the 8th running back, that is not even close to having the 8th best QB, where you can still have an elite talent at your 8th best QB like Kyler Murray. Whereas your 8th best running back is Saquon.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how elite Kyler Murray is. He starts off hot, but he always finishes with some rough games when you need him most in the playoffs. But let me clarify. I'm not saying draft a quarterback over an elite running back. I'm saying a lot of people roll the dice on waiting on that elite quarterback. So depending on your draft position, if the Jonathan Taylors are off the board, your game plan should be to get one of these valuable elite quarterbacks and a running back, because one player isn't going to take you to the championship. There's a lot of Jonathan Taylor owners out there who didn't even make the playoffs.
And the one
are there?
I would
absolutely. In my league, the person who had Jonathan Taylor only won like 4 games.
So
sounds like a bum.
Here's one thing that I'm surprised that Gaddy didn't bring up in his argument is that durability. Right. The best ability is availability for any of these guys week to week. Jonathan Taylor happened to be healthy all year long. If Derrick Henry were healthy, if Christian McCaffrey were healthy, we might not be talking about him as the number 1 running pick, right? Running back, whatever. You have to understand, like there is an argument to be had. If you're going to be a quarterback consistently getting 70 rushing yards and, rushing in for 7 or 8 touchdowns a year, sure. he might be a better pick for you just because he's an early stage of his career, like MVP Cam Newton style, right? Like just oftentimes in leagues, rushing touchdowns are worth more than passing touchdowns. So you can take that into account when you have a scrambling quarterback. Like, you know, if you're Mike Vick back in the day, he's getting you a ton of rushing yards, a ton of rushing touchdowns. Cam Newton, same thing. So there is an argument to be had with some of these scrambling quarterbacks that are picking up yards. Now, I'm not the guy who's picking Josh Allen over even some of those injured running backs I'm talking about. You'd have to twist my arm pretty hard to take him over McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, Taylor, even like Najee Harris. Running backs are a premium. You can go look at how many people Matt Stafford started on my team as a backup quarterback week 1 to Russell Wilson. Who do you think I went with? I mean, that was my backup. He was taken way late, right? Back seat. Like, people just forgot, you know, hey, Matt Stafford, well, he might be good. We'll see. There was 10 other quarterbacks taken before him.
So, no, and that's true. Every quarterback isn't going to give you 700 yards. I mean, we're talking about running backs. When you have a quarterback that can throw for 4,000, run for 700, and put up more than a handful of touchdowns, that is elite. Not every quarterback is going to do that. Like Patrick Mahomes, what's the difference between Mahomes and Josh Allen this year? Mahomes threw for more yards. They threw for the same amount of touchdowns, but Josh Allen has those rushing stats that boost him up way higher than Mahomes. Now, you know, typically you would think Mahomes would get like a 50 touchdowns, but this wasn't that type of year for them. And, you know, you got to strike while the iron's hot. Josh Allen isn't going to do that every year. I'm specifically talking about this year. And next year, who knows who that quarterback may be? You know, that rushing quarterback, or that quarterback that can get you 4,000 and then an additional 700 and over a handful of touchdowns, it may be somebody else. But we can definitely, I say,
if you don't know,
don't sleep on that guy.
If you don't know, though, then why would you draft them so early? Whereas you know for a fact, if you get the running back wrong, and I just named 2 guys, right? I named Jonathan Taylor and Austin Eckler, 80-point difference. Right, but QB, if you get the wrong guy, if you picked Tom Brady instead of Josh Allen, like you're all right. If you picked Aaron Rodgers, you're all right. But if you picked any person other than Jonathan Taylor, like, you're at a severe disadvantage.
Right.
That's not, you can still build a team with quality running backs, because at the end of the day, Jonathan Taylor, we're going to talk about who's your 2022 early number 1 pick. You know, I would say it's probably consensus is probably going to be him, right? You're not going to get a Jonathan Taylor next year because of what he did this year. You know, Derrick Henry usually taking, people are like, man, I'm not going to take him because he doesn't get receptions. Well, now he does. Like, you know, like some of these things happen, and then the next year is when you react to it. You know, Josh Allen is one of those quarterbacks who has consistently put up over the past few seasons now these passing stats and rushing stats and touchdowns. So he's in a different category fantasy football wise. And yes, if you're drafting the smart way, you still take the running back because of supply and demand. But in that second round, you know, especially if you have a late pick, if that elite quarterback is there who's going to give you running back production and quarterback production, you know, waiting, I could probably get an Aaron Rodgers in like the 8th round. And then you take this receiver who may be on your disappointed list by the end of the year, you are missing out on a consistent elite quarterback. And that's why I can't wait to be in the league with you guys next year, because I will be on this camera hoisting my championship. But that's our fantasy MVP.
That's the MVP right there.
Was your biggest surprise in fantasy football?
Let me go, because I just need to exhale right now. So let me just go right now, and I will tell you my biggest surprise. This actually should be a consensus pick. Spoiler alert: my number 1 for next year is not who will guess, but this. If this isn't a consensus pick, then I'll tell you something right now. Both of you guys are wrong, because there's only one true pick. This person was ranked 17th in his position in preseason rankings. 17th. And what did he finish as? He finished number 1. He's having a historic season. There is no other person. Biggest surprise of the year. His Cup runneth over. Cooper Kupp, the man himself. He has been incredible all year. I see CJ making that face. You knew that he was going to have a historic year? 17th ranking?
You know who's making history right now? A guy named Jamar Chase. Did you think that he was going to have this good of a year? Did you? Were you sitting there preseason saying Joe Burrow is going to tear it up with Jamar Chase?
What LSU boys? We already saw what Justin Jefferson did. What are you talking about? Jamar Chase? Yeah, that's what we were expecting.
No, I did not. I thought he would be good, but I did not think he was going to be this good.
No, I actually have to agree with Mr. Craig Joseph here, CJ, because Jamar Chase in the preseason was getting destroyed for dropping every pass that came his way. We knew that the addition of Matt Stafford was going to increase productivity. Now, did we know it was going to be on a historic pace? No, the answer is absolutely not. Cooper Kupp.
Did we know if it was Kupp or Robert Woods?
His Kupp running over was absolutely a surprise. Like, it could have been either receiver, but Kupp and Stafford.
That might have helped him. The fact that Woods was gone.
Exactly. Kupp and Stafford, they hit it off together, right? We knew that Kupp was going to be a great receiver this year, right? But what we did not know, what nobody saw coming was this rookie wide receiver.
What are you talking about?
It's arguable that Joe Burrow could be the surprise of the year, throwing for 4,600 yards. First of all, that Bengals team, but 1,400 yards for a rookie receiver and 13 touchdowns is ridiculous.
This is definitely on Randy Moss level. You guys literally seen what his teammate Justin Jefferson did. He was reunited with Burrow, the top receiver off the draft. You guys are surprised he had a great year.
You can't go by another team.
Hold on. Average draft position is a really good tell of what people thought people were going to do during the before fantasy football started, all the preseason, everything like that. Okay. Jamar Chase, average draft position, 76. Cooper Kupp, 30 points higher, 46. Who's the bigger surprise there?
Cooper Kupp, because he's
Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase by 3 rounds. Jamar Chase by 3 rounds.
He's literally outproducing any other receiver. That's what I'm saying. No one was predicting him to produce like this.
Neither would Jamar Chase.
Well, listen, forget stats. I've seen Matt Stafford make Golden Tate a household name as far as productivity. So when you bring Matt Stafford to the Rams, you knew one of those receivers were going to take off. Which one? Not sure, right? But you knew one of them was going to be producing at a top 5 level in the NFL. Because when Matt Stafford gets it going with you, he's going to keep going to you. That is Matt Stafford's MO. That's why the other receiver who has just as much productivity, as Cooper Kupp is who? It's a receiver that played with Matt Stafford, Megatron, in that historical year that Megatron had. So I am not as surprised by the productivity of Cooper Kupp, but I'm not trying to diminish it because it was absolutely a significant season for him. But to me, it is not more surprising than the Bengals. On this very sportscast, when I was talking about the AFC North, none of us were giving the Bengals any love. Maybe they get 5 wins. It didn't seem like it would be a good offensive system. But their entire system, they're the first group to have a quarterback with over 4,000 yards passing, 2 receivers with over 1,000 yards, and a running back over 1,000 yards, and everybody be 25 years old or less. That offense took the league by storm, and the name that stirred that pot is Jamar Chase, who was getting killed in the offseason for his drops. Is he even going to be a good NFL receiver? I don't know. Maybe they should have went with the offensive tackle, from Oregon. That was all the questions we heard heading into the season, and then Jamar Chase ripped it.
the best thing to ask Woody is, all right, let's just say you drafted both these guys way too high, right? Like you second round, you're like super high on. You knew something that nobody else knew. You take Cooper Kupp in the second round. You're going to take way more heat before week 1 for taking Ja'Marr Chase second round than you would have if you took Cooper Kupp. Way more. Because you could make that argument. You could make that argument that Gaddy is just preaching on. Like, you know, it's Stafford came in stronger QB. You go in with Woods, another receiver, like to take a little bit of pressure off. One of those guys, like he said, was going to take off with Stafford, and it happened to be Kupp. Now, Woods getting injured, if you say that didn't benefit Kupp's production, that's just wildly inaccurate. I mean, Van Jefferson was the second best receiver on that team with 771 yards. You had 2 other receivers on the Cincinnati Bengals that Tyler Boyd, people forget, he's got 820 something yards too. I mean, if he has a big game next week, they could have 3 1,000-yard receivers on that team. Like, that's ridiculous. And Ja'Marr Chase being able to have the season that he had with the teammates who were taking away some of those looks. Could you imagine if T. Higgins got hurt and he didn't have another person to throw the ball to, the amount of targets that he would have seen if he saw 2-3 more targets per game from Burrows? He would have his cup would have runneth over more than Cooper Kupp's. So
I'm hearing a lot of would have, could have, if, should, what. Like, I don't even know.
I'm
we're
putting
in a hypothetical. I don't even know where we're at. All I'm
giving you is facts and probability.
What were those facts? There are a whole bunch of ifs.
It was facts to me because the scenario that he painted was basically the scenario that Cooper Kupp went through, right? Cooper Kupp had more targets because he had less talent around him, right? That is the fact that he dropped. And it's like, man, it's not really too often.
What does that have to do? What does that have to do with the surprise? We're not talking about
how about
got here. I'm talking about
how about you
them to be and where they currently are. Cooper Kupp is number 1.
So Ja'Marr Chase going from 76 to 3, right? 76 pre-draft ADP to being ranked the 3rd overall scoring receiver in fantasy, from Cooper Kupp to 46 to 1. The bigger change is Ja'Marr Chase, just by
ADP, but Cooper Kupp outscored.
That's what we're talking about. We're talking about the bigger surprise.
Yeah, but we're also talking about the numbers in which they actually produced. Like Cooper Kupp, right. The margin that Cooper Kupp is far and ahead, the number 1 wide receiver.
Ja'Marr Chase was only like 50 fantasy points behind Cooper Kupp. How is that? Listen, for a rookie who was dropping passes, who was literally taken in between the 7th and 8th round of drafts, compared to Cooper Kupp, who was still taken round 4, right? So he's still probably at the very least your number 2 receiver. I mean, I'm in an auction draft, and Cooper Kupp went for a ton of money, like of a $200 limit. He was going for like $40 still, which is a major percentage of people's salary. Ja'Marr Chase was going for $15-$16. I mean, that's a steal. Ja'Marr Chase is far and away I shouldn't phrase it like that, because he isn't far and away. You do make a good case for Cooper Kupp, but I think Ja'Marr Chase gets the edge just because of the unknowns, going into the season.
Well, the Bengals are definitely the biggest surprise. Like in the actual NFL, I don't think anyone could argue that there's a bigger surprise. Like the Bengals.
Bingo. No, keep going, because you're about to make my point. Keep going. I'm not interrupting. Keep going.
I'm just saying they had an historic season, but don't let the team success blind you.
What is a big driver of that team's success? It is the performance of Ja'Marr Chase. Whereas when Matt Stafford went to the Rams, you gave them the championship almost. So you knew that they were going to be balling out there. When Matt Stafford went to the Rams, you anointed them instantly. So you expected more production out of their guys.
Not for Cooper Kupp.
But Matt Stafford going there means that things are going to be better for the receivers. Yeah, no, look, it cannot be denied that Cooper Kupp is definitely a surprise. I personally, and CJ agrees, don't think it can be argued that his production was more surprising than Jamar Chase. And the beautiful thing about the Sportscast world is we get to hear what you guys think about this topic. But CJ,
let me give you one. I got to give you one last point on this because I just looked it up as a stat guy. I had to, right? So since fantasy football began, right? Okay. Yeah. The most fantasy points in a game by a wide receiver, Jamar Chase's game, 266 yards, 3 touchdowns, 11 receptions, was the 7th highest ever. Cooper Kupp's not on that list. Just FYI, for the record. So you want to talk about surprise? Oh, if you said that he was going to finish top 10 and have one of the best games, if you told me before the season Jamar Chase is going to finish top 5 receiver and have one of the single best games fantasy football has ever seen, I would have told you. I would have asked you what you're smoking. There's no like, you're ridiculous, guy. If you told me that Cooper Kupp was going to finish as the number 1 receiver, I'd be like, you know what, maybe it's possible. I'm not gonna tell you no.
Well, I'll tell you what. If we put a poll to this, who's the biggest surprise?
We're doing it.
I think there's going to be a lot of fans chasing our line of thought as in agreeing, and they're going to be flipping Woody's cup somewhere else because
that is a horrible
Chase is absolutely Jamar Chase is absolutely the more surprising of the two wide receivers.
The whole Bengals are surprised. Don't get caught up in the whole surprise. T. Higgins might be a bigger surprise.
They're surprised because of Jamar Chase. That's why they're
I don't understand how they're all surprised because of Jamar Chase.
He opened up the run game.
We're all of 4,000 yards of Joe Burrow's directly to Jamar Chase. I don't understand how he just
because when you have a dynamic talent like that, who right off the gate from game 1. When he put that film out there, that changes the way defenses has to play the offense. Cooper Kupp, listen, if you watch the Rams, it's nothing spectacular. He's catching balls and he's doing what Julian Edelman used to do. Now, I'm not making it sound like it's nothing, but he's catching passes. He's got yak skills. No, he's got yak skills. That's what they want to do. He's going to do yards after the catch. Where Jamar Chase is beating double teams, catching balls over defenders, dusting people downfield. Like he's literally looking like Randy Moss is back in the league right now. He started off the season on the same pace as Randy Moss. So I didn't expect Jamar Chase to be Randy Moss, just being honest with you. And what's really impressive about it is not only is this his rookie year, but the man did not play football, last year. So, I mean, that's even it takes receivers a long time to really get up to speed in the NFL. But that surprise.
Snag, for those of us listening to this, Snag literally put up a graphic to tell us to move on to the next topic. So we can.
Because you guys already let me down. He could have been agreeing with you. He could have been agreeing. Let's go. Looks like it's agreeing. But what's this? We're talking about the bigger surprise. What's the biggest letdown surprise? Like, who surprised you? Who just fantasy let you down this year?
I took this personally. I just told you guys who my starting quarterback was in fantasy. I was so hyped. I spent all my money on Christian McCaffrey. I was loaded. I was going into the season so hyped I was like, Russell Wilson's going to tear it up. DJ Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, he's going to be dishing this year. Good thing I picked Matt Stafford too. Russell Wilson, biggest letdown. I mean, yeah, you can blame the finger injury for a few weeks there, but even before that, he was just underperforming. I mean, even Metcalf had a little bit of a hot streak going, and then 4 weeks in a row, he was a dud. You didn't know Russell Wilson was just unreliable. I mean, at the end of the season, it seemed like things started to click because they finally got the run game going with Penny. He kind of came out of nowhere, and maybe that'll be reestablished next year, but they don't even know if Russell Wilson's going to be coming back next year. That was just that one hurt. That one hurt personally. So I'm maybe a little bit biased because he was on my squad, but he's my biggest letdown this year, Russell Wilson.
Seahawks were one of the bigger letdowns in the entire NFL. That was Will Gaddy's pick for the NFC West champion by the way, if anyone's wondering. That's
I
Will's
mean,
team.
if your quarterback gets hurt, what happens? Like, what do you expect?
I mean, they weren't playing well before, as CJ alluded to, but no worries.
The Chiefs weren't playing well, and you guys gave up on them. And look at them now.
Who gave up on?
You guys said, no, listen, stop. When I said they would probably finish the year with no more than 4 losses, it was all laughs. Like, they were 2-3. What's going on with the Chiefs? I said, don't be fooled by this start. It's 5 weeks into the season. They're going to turn it around. So all I'm saying is the Seahawks, had Russell Wilson not got injured, had plenty of time to turn their season around.
4 losses. Got you. Okay, that's fair. So I feel like there were a lot of letdowns. This was actually a year of the letdowns. And Russell Wilson was definitely one of them. I'm actually going to give Stag a shout out because he just let us know that Calvin Ridley was his. And he would. I honestly had Calvin Ridley and my choice on the same team. As a matter of fact, I was really excited. People were texting me like, "Oh, good pickup." I had Stephon Diggs as my first wide receiver. Second wide receiver was Calvin Ridley. My third wide receiver was my letdown. My fourth wide receiver, I had Michael Thomas. I was stashing him. And then my fifth was Corey Davis, who, he was the de facto number 1 in New York. I was like, I am stacked. We all know what happened with Ridley. Hopefully he's okay. I'm not sure what's going on there. Allen Robinson, who his entire career has been immune to the horrendousness of Blake Bortles and Mitch Trubisky, is out here lining up. He's on a franchise tag, so he's playing for a contract. I was so certain that he was going to at least be one of the best, wide receiver 3s in the league. I mean, to get him as my third, that was considered a steal.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he robbed me. I mean, that was horrendous. I mean, just that same list of projections, he was the 13th ranked wide receiver in fantasy, above Cooper Kupp and obviously above Jamar Chase. And he is not even in the top 90. He has been hard. He never actually had a good game this season. He never had one. Even when Justin Fields started finding his stride a little bit, he found Darnell Mooney and Allen Robinson. I actually have no idea, like this is getting out of fantasy a little bit, but what is his market? Because he is talented. He's 28 years old. I would imagine this is still his prime. He's not hurt. So I don't know what's going on there, who's going to pick him up. But rest assured, he is not going to willingly sign with a team that does not have a top 10 quarterback in the NFL because he's tired of it. And I am tired of my decision of drafting him this year.
Oh, yeah. It's bad.
Yeah, Allen Robinson, definitely a major disappointment because, like you said, you don't plan to draft him early because of the quarterback situation, but when you do get him, you feel good about it because he's played well with regardless of who's the quarterback been, right? But this year was definitely a disastrous year in the Windy City. My pick for the biggest letdown in fantasy this year, it's got to be Ezekiel Elliott. Now, he had a rough week 1, right? But it's against, at the time, the Buccaneers were playing historical rushing defense. Nobody was running on them for multiple weeks. You got Vita Vea and Ndamukong Suh in the middle, and you got the best front 7 that the league has seen in a while. So that was, we even talked about it on the show. That week's forgivable. But the next 5 weeks, Ezekiel Elliott really ran off. Then they had the bye week. And then coming off the bye week against Denver, Ezekiel Elliott hurt his knee. He took a couple series off, but he came back in the game, and he never missed a game. But he has not been healthy since that Denver game. He's only got 2 games of 50 yards rushing since week 9. He hasn't been targeted in the receiving game much. The Cowboys have literally been trying to just use him sparingly just to coast to the playoffs. But that doesn't do fantasy owners any good when you look at Ezekiel Elliott's average draft position, which is in the top half of the first round, consistently in most leagues. So I would have to say, when you take a running back, you expect that premium production, especially if you have one of those top 6 picks, and you spend them on one of the better running backs that you can get. You got to feel good about that and pairing him with whomever else you draft. And Ezekiel Elliott was a wild letdown for the second year in a row in fantasy football. So a lot of people after that first stretch thought that he was back, Zeke was back, and then the fall off was fast and it lasted. So I would have to say that number 21, Zeke, my man, biggest letdown in fantasy football this year.
Yeah, he was part of a big trade for me. I traded him a little early. I drafted Christian McCaffrey and Ezekiel Elliott, spent all my money on those 2 guys. I thought the 2-headed horse would get me to the finals. I finished the year with neither of them, made it to the finals, but didn't finish the year with either of those guys on my team. And Zeke, part of a trade that netted me James Conner, who really just kind of tore it up. I picked him up in the week that I got him was the week he went off for that 37-point game. It was just ridiculous. So I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I honestly agree with you, Will. Like, that was huge letdown for me because, I was smelling the coffee a little bit soon. Like when he had one of his drop-off weeks, I probably was, like one of those Massachusetts guys who's got too hot of a finger to just, too short of patience. But I was just like, get him out. He's out. He's done. Like, nope, give me what I can. I need to upgrade receivers. Maybe somebody will give me a lot for him and change my team around. But yeah, huge disappointment.
Definitely a huge disappointment.
Well, that is, I feel like it's a little harsh. Especially for a Cowboys fan, you out here, just turning on your guys.
Whoa, stop. Don't say anything else until I'm finished speaking. I am not turning on my guy because I said he was a fantasy football letdown. Fantasy football means nothing to me. I agree with the Cowboys not using him a lot. He got hurt, okay? You don't want him to miss the full game because you like his pass protection better than Tony Pollard. Nobody in fantasy football cares about who's protecting the quarterback. Will Gaddy cares about Zeke protecting Dak. I don't want him to run the ball as much if he's not healthy. Keep nursing it until we get to the playoffs. Forget your fantasy football team. So I am not turning on my guy just because I'm telling the facts about him being a fantasy football letdown to people like you both who only care about Zeke in the box score. I care about Zeke on the roster. Now you can say what you wanted to say.
Whew. So with that being said, he still finished in the top 10. He was still a top 10 running back, like in fantasy. So I feel like it's a little bit hard.
Bad year for running backs overall.
That's actually a pretty good point because like most of the top ones actually got hurt. So that is a good point. But still, in the end, like if you had Zeke, like you still had the 6th best running back in all of fantasy. I feel like that's a little harsh to have the 6th best in their position. When you look
at that in the grand scheme of things, that doesn't help you week to week when Zeke was out there getting 5 points, 6 points. Like in consecutive weeks, he's putting up this minimal amount of points that you're probably not winning your games with. That's what makes him a letdown. Then he gets a big week where he has 48 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns, right? But what about the 4 weeks prior to that? So that's what I'm saying. On a consistent basis, he wasn't bringing what you would expect him to bring because his usage was significantly limited. So that's why he's my pick. In the grand scheme of things, if you just look at where he ranked against everybody else, every player on that ranking has a story that you could probably tell.
That's fair. I wonder if there is an award that Side to Side Sports will unanimously award somebody.
Well, I know this next one is definitely not. I don't think any of you are going to say my waiver wire pick of the year. In fact, I should probably just say it first.
Say it first.
Oh, my goodness. There is only one true answer for this. I'm disappointed already that I'm probably the only one that noticed this, right? But waiver wire. What do you gentlemen usually pick up off the waiver wire most consistently in a fantasy year?
Defenses.
Exactly, right? You probably look for a team that has a weak matchup, and that's who I'm going to pick up. Now, there's one team that one of you in the fantasy sports world out there probably picked up 1 week, and then you were like, And then the next week they scored a lot more. You're like, And then the next week they continued to score, and you're like, okay, maybe I got to just play these boys, right? I'm talking about the Dallas Cowboys for waiver wire pickup of the year. Last year, they had the most disastrous defense. If you drafted the Cowboys defense, you are a fool, right? You're definitely not going to play them against Tampa Bay on the first week. But then if you pick them up afterwards because of the matchups, well, what did the Dallas Cowboys do this year? They had 8 defensive touchdowns. That's more than some wide receivers. They had 38 sacks, 25 interceptions, and 8 recovered fumbles. They were by far the leading defensive scoring unit in the fantasy sports world. So I don't know who else out there. I mean, there's some great picks out there that you probably picked up on the waiver wire, and they probably did some good things for you. But the Cowboys consistently held it down for a defense that scored as much as anyone else on your roster all throughout the season.
Wow. So those stats are true, huh? 38 sacks. 4 minutes of my time wasted hearing you ramble about the Cowboys yet another time. Do you have another Cowboys pick in here? Are we just picking?
I mean, is it just about the Cowboys, or are we talking about who was the more productive waiver wire pick? Because I don't know if you can make a case for your pick like I just did for mine. I would love to hear
this pick is among like fantasy like winners. This is someone who was not drafted at all. Then
we'll see if he's a waiver wire award winner.
you're about to see.
Couldn't have been drafted, right?
You should see, because I'm saying if he's a waiver wire pickup because he was picked up during the waiver. He was not drafted. No one respected him. No one was expecting him to play.
I'm just saying that's the basis for this award. That fact right there. We're not giving this award to people who were drafted. We're giving this award to people who weren't drafted and were picked up off the waiver wire. But continue with your pick.
All right. I still will, because this man finished even above Zeke in the running back rankings. You could actually also, I think the most valuable part of picking up this guy is that if you needed a running back, he got you. But if you needed a wide receiver, he also got you and was one of the most productive people in all of fantasy. I'm talking about none other than the journeyman who might not be a journeyman anymore, Cordero Patterson. He was a fantasy winner. This is someone who off the waiver wire was literally outproducing your average receiver or your average running back. Anytime there was a bye week, he was the absolute best. He's like one of the first in the history of fantasy to be a gadget fantasy player, where you could just slot him wherever you need him. Cordero Patterson, without the shadow of a doubt, more than them boys. That doesn't even make sense to me. But Cordero Patterson, that is a pick. Waiver wire pickup of the year.
All right. Well,
that's a great pick. Cowboys have more touchdowns than him.
You guys might smell it. Yeah.
But anyway,
you guys might smell a theme here, but I'm going with a Cincinnati guy. His name is T. Higgins.
What was he a waiver wire pickup?
Oh yes. In my league, he was not.
How
drafted.
many teams in your league? There was 6, or there was more than 6?
10-team league, was not drafted.
Well, 10-team league. Still, that's weird.
Borderline.
What's the name of your league?
What is the name of my league? What relevance does that have on anything?
Because I was going to look it up and apply to be in it next year.
Listen, we can battle. We'll do battle next year, Gaddy. You're the one who.
Let's do it.
Listen to me, dude. There was some talent. There were some talented teams. I didn't come in first. There's some guys that pay attention in this league. He was scooped up pretty quick. I'll tell you that. But I think T. Higgins outperformed what anybody thought he would. Now, I don't think he's as much of a surprise as his other boy on the other side, Jamar Chase. But I don't think anybody expected a 1,000-yard season out of T. Higgins. I mean, if you wanted to pick him up and put him on your bench and, potentially slot him in for a bye week, maybe have him in a flex, for some games, okay. But there were other options out there. Like, you guys are ultra surprised in a 10-team league that T. Higgins might have been one of the top available guys. It was just, he happened to be a wide receiver too. On any given roster, and just week to week was producing. So that was my waiver wire. Sorry if it's a little bit, this is, we'll go with the 10-team waiver wire pickup. Okay. All right. I'm not going with them boys for pickup there either. But yeah, that's who I had. Sorry if it was a little biased towards the 10 team. If you're in a 12 team, I'll get you next time.
Well, if it's 12 team, there's no doubt it's Cordero Patterson.
Cordero Patterson seemed like a pretty big layup to me. It's just so like the layup pick. Like it's obvious. Like he's. I like to try and come up with something a little bit, new. I could just be like, "Yep, Cordero Patterson. See you guys. Have a great night."
Fair enough.
I mean, both really good picks. So I don't think. I mean, 3 really good picks, regardless of what you guys.
No, both was correct.
Yeah, no, both really good picks. But it can't be denied that the most frequent transaction on a waiver wire is a defense. And if you find a defense that can score consistently, you're keeping that defense all year. And when you really feel confident about them, you're like, man, they're playing a good offense, but I gotta start them, and that is the case with the Dallas Cowboys. No bias necessary. The stats speak for themselves. But now, do I expect them to do it again next year? I wouldn't put money on it. Who knows, right? Do you guys expect your players to perform like they did this year, next year? Who knows? Who would you say is the most likely to fall off in fantasy football? 2022.
I've got one for you here. And I got a reason behind it. Deontay Johnson put up a pretty big year this
great
year.
Answer.
Okay. We don't know what the QB situation is. Not looking like it's going to be Big Ben. So you're going to be seeing. It doesn't look like they believe in Rudolph. I wouldn't either. I mean, if they give him a shot, not looking great for Deontay. My opinion, if you go with a rookie quarterback, you still got, you get that time to learn with him. This isn't a Joe Burrow situation where he played with Jamar Chase and he can just kind of wing it and take it and have that chemistry. I just see Deontay Johnson taking a step back next year, and mainly because that QB situation is going to be uncertain. Now, listen, if they go out and they get Russell Wilson, he plays a full year and he's got Deontay Johnson to throw the ball to, he might see 12, 15 targets a game and outproduce what he did this year. Who knows? But from the outside looking in at this point with the uncertainty, I'm saying he's taking a step back.
That's a really good pick.
Really is. He's my runner-up, actually.
Who's the number one? Give us the number one, Rudy.
Oh, I was waiting for Will, but I can't. I will. That was definitely my runner-up. I don't know. I don't really believe in him like that. But the number one thing that I look for when someone breaks out is how many touchdowns did they have, or how much of their actual point total is attributed to touchdowns. Because sometimes people just go off. And the easiest example that comes to mind is when Eric Ebron literally led the NFL in touchdowns. When the very next year, he was drafted like in the 3rd or 4th round. And I was like, are you guys for real? Like, you expect Eric Ebron to do that again? Touchdowns, have people they just have people confused because you're only staring at the stats and you're only like, oh, well, he finished 5th overall or he finished with X amount of points. But touchdowns are worth 6. So this person, I'm gonna have to put the same category. And let me just go on record as saying the only person that I ever said, you know what, I think that person is touchdown dependent, and they proved me wrong like multiple years in a row, is Aaron Jones. Kudos to him. Fantastic player. Everybody else that I've said, oh no, he just had a lot of touchdowns this year, has been pretty bad the next year. So let me add James Conner to that list.
That is my pick.
Well, then take it away, Miss McGatty.
Great pick. Good
it's crazy that you literally said all the stuff. James Conner reminds me of a player named TJ Duckett, right? There was a season where TJ Duckett, this was like in the early 2000s for the Atlanta Falcons, he butts out with like almost 800 yards rushing and 11 touchdowns. And he was high on a fantasy football radar, but he doesn't stay healthy. And then he doesn't get you that production. Always going to be a goal line back, so he'll get you like 6, 7, 8 touchdowns. But James Conner is basically the epitome of another TJ Duckett. He has a big season. He gets you touchdowns, but then he breaks down. He misses games. And then next year, can you trust he does the same thing? They may go with another running back in the offseason. We don't know what they're going to add to their roster, but even if you put the same roster out there in 2022, I wouldn't expect him to have 14 touchdowns and nearly 800 yards rushing again. I just wouldn't expect him to have it. I wouldn't expect him to play, as many games as he did this year. So, and plus they kind of run a 2 running back system, and the other running back can easily get that rhythm and just take the job. So, James Conner is definitely was absolutely my pick for a fall off player. And ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. The first. Oh no, it's not, because both of you.
It's not. It's not.
All three of us need to agree on something. That hasn't happened yet.
But hey, I got real quick before we get to the next award. I just want to point out one more comparison to James Conner that I like to make was Brandon Jacobs. Brandon Jacobs, James Conner might be a better pass catcher. He's proven that this year, that he can actually catch the ball out of the backfield. But Brandon Jacobs had 2,000-yard seasons back to back. One of those seasons, he put in 15 touchdowns. What are we looking at right now? You know what I mean? A guy who just put up 14 touchdowns, 1,000+ yards. Like, is he going to do that again? I don't know. So, like, we all didn't have the same pick, but I think we're all in agreement on there. Like, you don't want to pick James Conner too high next year in your leagues. I don't know if he's going to put up that type of production.
Okay.
Definitely.
Well, Woody doesn't want to miss this next award. So, like, I think this is a perfect time to talk about who in fantasy football next year is going to bounce back. Let's start with you.
All right. This is definitely not the award, but we're all going to agree. I'll tell you that right now, because not one person on planet Earth is thinking about this person. And there's like a lot of popular choices, right? There should be, at least, right? Christian McCaffrey, Russell Wilson, right? Calvin Ridley, Allen Robinson, all the guys that we talked about as letdowns. A pretty underrated one is DeAndre Hopkins, who didn't have the best year. But this person kind of is coming at a complete left field. But I do think there is an opportunity here. He was actually pretty good last year, and we don't even know what he was going to do this year because he got hurt. But next year, I wouldn't be surprised if DJ Chark makes some noise.
Ooh.
With Trevor Lawrence, we don't know who the coach is. But we know CJ's team, the dumpster team, are the Jags. And I think DJ Chark is, I don't even know if I should say I think. It should be a fact that he is the best receiver on that team. And Trevor has arm talent. Are we going to finally see it unleashed? I don't know, because the man has not thrown a touchdown since Halloween. And it is 2022. That's already last year. So it's been a little bit of time. So Trevor is struggling. There's no doubt there. But I think if he can get his act together, I mean, DJ, he was flourishing with who was it? Jake Luton, or Luton. I don't know. Luton. He was succeeding with anybody throwing him the ball. So I think next year, if he's healthy, Trevor Lawrence, he has the talent. I think that will surprise a lot of people. He might jump up into, like a top, 25, fantasy receiver.
That is a very interesting pick, because my pick for bounce back player next year is actually Trevor Lawrence. And I'll tell you why, right? Just to clarify things, Trevor Lawrence threw a touchdown against the Patriots, and it was his first touchdown since Halloween. That is very scary. I was born on October the 17th. That is the 10th month and the 17th day. And it is so atrocious that we're in the 18th week of football for the first overall pick, and he's only thrown 10 touchdowns and 17 interceptions. It was a disastrous year for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Urban Meyer, I said at the beginning of the year, I don't think that's a good fit for a rookie quarterback who needs to come into the NFL, learn the NFL way. Now you're bringing in a college coach who has to learn the NFL way. And it was a disaster all year. The Jacksonville Jaguars were in complete disarray. I don't know who the Jaguars are going to hire next. That remains to be seen. But whoever they pick is going to be a heavy focus on someone who can get production out of Trevor Lawrence. There may not be any Sean McVays out there, right? But there's some young, innovative offensive minds who can have the same effect on Trevor Lawrence as Sean McVay did Jared Goff, who had an atrocious rookie year as well. So if I had to bet on someone who would be a bounce-back player, obviously you're not going to risk it all and draft Trevor Lawrence high in the draft. But when you pick your backup quarterback and you sit and wait and see what happens, he might be a guy that you can start and feel comfortable trading your starter for a package of other things in fantasy football. So my bounce-back player of the year, absolutely Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, and I like that point too. They're going to look for a coach, a young coach that's going to be able to come up with some creative plays, right? Like they have. The reason why I was like not so low on the Jags wasn't because of Urban Meyer, right? Like, I mean, I wasn't like on an Urban Meyer hype train. I was on the Trevor Lawrence hype train. Like, he does have arm talent. You guys said it. He does have a talent receiver in Chark. He had pieces around him. I mean, we saw what James Robinson was able to do behind him. They weren't really utilizing Chenault in how he should, and that's Urban Meyer's fault, right? I mean, I didn't think Urban Meyer would be as bad as he was, and I think that I don't want to make excuses, but I think that was a large part of why they were so horrible. And I don't think I'm too out of line saying that. There's a reason why he got fired and he couldn't even complete one season in the NFL. I mean, from week 3, he said it was like playing Alabama every week. It's like, what world do you live in right now where you thought that this was going to be college football? Like, are you, dude, what do you, I mean, and that was just a mess. And I don't know if you guys saw in the past couple of days what the Jaguars fans are going to be doing this Sunday. You guys catch that yet?
Oh, yes, I did. I did catch that.
Clown faces because everybody's, they didn't fire their GM, which everybody is, pretty worked up about. And so they're putting the clown emoji all over his face with a mustache that he's got too. And everybody's going to be wearing clown suits to Jacksonville games. And I just had to validate that, my hype was behind the Trevor Lawrence, that offense, the young talent that I thought could kind of outspeed like some of what we saw from the Bengals, right? That recipe of young speed, health, consistency, and maybe edge out 7 wins. I wasn't expecting a ton from these guys, but good Lord, they underperformed from what I thought. Now, that said, comeback player of the year for me, a guy that I traded for this year in fantasy, definitely let me down, Deandre Hopkins. How many 100-yard games do you think Deandre Hopkins had this year?
I'm going to go with 1. Oh, 0. Wow.
0.
Wow.
0 100-yard games. Now, he still found the end zone. They loved throwing to him in the end in the red zone. Still ended up with 8 touchdowns in 14 weeks. So wasn't a stinker, right? But he wasn't that guy, right? The guy that we've seen, that fantasy, that number one that's just going to go out consistently, get you 20 points a week because he's catching the ball constantly and getting downfield and getting in the end zone. I expected way more from him this year, and I think he's going to come back healthy next year. And, I don't care who they bring back for the receivers. They got AJ Green out there on the other side who's still showing that he's a respectable wide receiver. Wesley has shown up the past couple of weeks. He might be making a name for himself next year. Some of the balls that he's catching and bringing down, I don't know if it's Kyler Murray making him look good, but they've got some talent. Maybe they'll bring back Zach Ertz again. I mean, that offense is good. There's not going to be this double teaming action that DeAndre Hopkins is going to see, and he thrives in one-on-one coverage. So I expect him to bounce back big time next year, continue that touchdown pace, but start putting up those 100, 125, 150-yard performances with 12, 15 catches, etc.
No, that's a good point. DeAndre just has to stay healthy. Even though he just began to miss games, he was playing banged up all year long. So that's a large reason for his, he was questionable heading into every week almost. Mm-hmm. And then he would decide to play and he would bust out with a 70-yard catch. And then he didn't play the rest of the game. So yeah, I would say he's a good pick for a player that should bounce back next week.
Yo, at least he didn't quit at halftime. At least he didn't quit at halftime during any of those games.
Yeah, right, exactly. We've been seeing that happen. Aside from Antonio Brown, a player on the Buffalo Bills did it. I don't know what's going on with these.
He didn't take his shirt off though. In the
he didn't take his shirt off and dance around.
Let's go Jets. Let's go Jets.
And the thing I want to say about that is the story. There's different stories out there, but the one that they say that favors Antonio Brown is, hey, my ankle hurt. I can't go back in. You need to get back in or get out of here. Now I'm going to go skip around the whole field on his ankle. It just doesn't make sense to me. It just does not make sense at all. But we know he's not going to be the number one player drafted in fantasy football next year.
Try me, Daddy.
Is going to be the 2022 number one fantasy pick. Is this the moment, gentlemen, where we all agree?
No, it's not, because I already know yours, and I know that I don't agree.
Hold on. There's a good podium for this, right? Non-PPR leagues, Jonathan Taylor. PPR league, Cooper Kupp. Period.
What? I disagree with both of those.
Oh,
what?
Yeah. What are you talking about?
No, come on. All right, well, that's mine. I hope we're in the same league next year, boys. I really do.
Well, you don't have to say I hope. That's going to happen. Yeah, that's not even a question. My number one pick, and see, this is one of my biggest things about fantasy, and I actually have a friend who I know is listening to this episode that will laugh when I say this, but you cannot chase the past. You can't do it. Very, very rarely does a person repeat at the top of the fantasy chain.
I disagree with that entirely.
Because people are drafting Christian McCaffrey in consecutive years. There's certain talent.
Aaron Rodgers, the number one. These Devontae Adams.
And Aaron, what do you mean? I'm talking about where they finished. It's not about where they drafted, where they finished.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'll say I apologize for interrupting because there are some players that you should not chase their past based on circumstances that got them their production. But there are some players you would be foolish to, once you see it, not believe it can happen again. So it really depends on the player. So now I'm really curious to hear who your player is.
Me too. Continue.
Now that I have the floor, when I had it and it was stolen.
I'm sorry. I apologize sincerely.
No, I mean, Jonathan, he's a good pick, and he has a great offensive line. I'm not saying he is trash. He's not trash. He's definitely a top 5. But my number one pick, who I got to pick, I don't care if it's standard or PPR. I am tempted in a PPR league, depending on what happens with Devontae Adams, Aaron, whatever, Devontae Adams is incredible. But Standard PPR don't matter. If this man is healthy in the preseason, you better draft him. And that is the only person other than Triple H that I've ever called king in my entire life. I'm talking about King Henry, Derrick Henry. The boy is a beast. Like, until we see like some sort of bad game or some sort of history of something,
like injury history.
Yeah, I mean, what do you mean? He's been he just missed time, but he's been a steady, consistent performer in the NFL.
Mm-hmm. And now he got injured. So
one time, that doesn't mean one injury does not make somebody injury prone.
He also,
I would feel more confident.
Like, it's also, I mean, for you to say in a non PPR, because he could be outscored by other running backs in a PPR league. I mean, in any given year, he does not catch the ball out of the backfield. You look at guys like
Alvin literally started catching the ball out of the backfield, and the production. The man was still in the top 5 of rushing production.
Like 3 weeks after he got hurt. I know.
I don't know. I just don't get how you can say you can't chase the pass, and this is your pick.
What do you mean?
Yeah, like, you're basing it. The reason why he should be the number 1 pick in fantasy football is because of what he's been doing when.
But then in that case, then everybody would be in the pass. What are you talking about?
No, but so you said you can't chase the pass. In fact, those were your words.
Yes. So you cannot chase one great season. Someone has a breakout season, and now everybody flocks to them. Derrick Henry has been one of the most consistent performers in fantasy for the last 4 years.
Hey, how can you tell me that he's been catching the ball more out of the backfield? I don't. The stats don't. I mean, they don't say that. Like his yards this year were like, I mean, I guess pacing better, but like I mean, if you were to say, all right, through 8 weeks, let's double his numbers, he's going to get you 36 catches. That's, I mean,
did I say that he was an elite pass catcher? I said
no. But my point is, in a PPR league, there are some running backs that might get you better. That's why I was kind of separating those, because it does matter. I mean, if you're a running back who catches 10 balls a game, right, that are just dump offs in a full point PPR league, that's 10 points. I mean, right off the bat, and Derrick Henry might get you 2. It's, I mean, you know, compared, like that's a pretty big, that's a touchdown difference in a PPR.
At the time of his injury, Derrick Henry was number 1 in PPR. Like, he was a number 1 running back in PPR. Like, he consistently makes up for it by rushing for 200 yards and like 4 TDs in a game. If someone is rushing for 200 yards and 4 TDs in a game, they can have negative catch. They can have 4 fumbles. I do not care, because the production is incredible. Like, that's what, like, Derrick Henry, he has been consistent. So let me clarify, because I guess, yes, everybody, right? Anybody you're chasing the pass, but I'm saying 1 great year does not mean 7 great years in the future. All right. All I'm saying, like, I like to go with consistency. And that was a reason why I loved Christian McCaffrey, was because every single game he played, if it's PPR, he has 30 points.
Yeah.
Once upon a
literally does not matter who you do. He was the epitome of consistency.
Once upon a time,
Henry,
there was a fantasy running back who was consistently the number 1 consensus pick in the NFL draft, right? And I'm going to tell you who that player was. And then a few years later, there was another running back who actually dethroned him and became the consensus number 1 pick for running back in almost every fantasy draft. And the 2 things that these guys have in common, they were bell cows. LaDainian Tomlinson in his rookie year rushed for almost 1,270 yards. Then the next year, he was over 1,600 yards. Adrian Peterson in his rookie year, rushed for over 1,300 yards. Then he went for over 1,700 yards. Do you know who reminds me of those 2 guys right now? Jonathan Taylor. It's not a 1-year fluke. Jonathan Taylor, on a part-time basis last year, he started the majority of the games, but they were really handing the ball off to a lot of people, had 1,200 yards rushing. This year, they turned the offense over to him. And he had a better quarterback last year in Phillip Rivers. This year, they got off to a low start. All they had was Jonathan Taylor, facing 8-9 men in the box, still ran for 1,700 plus yards and 18 touchdowns, and still had over 300 yards receiving. And that's not even what he does well. I'm willing to put my faith and trust in fantasy football on Jonathan Taylor being the safest running back pick in next year's draft based off of his first 2 seasons. Now, I'm not a risk taker. So in our league, if I have the second pick and Woody, you have the first pick, I'm going to be happy because you can go ahead and take Derrick Henry. I'm sure he's going to do good for you. But, once you get that injury that keeps you out for a significant time in the season, it's always possible that injury comes back or another injury happens, even if it's just for a couple weeks. So I would say next year, Derrick Henry's average draft position is probably going to be in that middle to late part of the first round, because that's one thing that fantasy football users do. They run away from people who were just injured for a long time.
Listen,
right? And I think that would be – I would still draft Derrick Henry. I just wouldn't draft him over Jonathan Taylor. But I do think my way too early 2022 number 1 pick, because of the reasons I stated, Jonathan Taylor.
To your point, that's why I love drafting third, right? Then I can't take any blame for making the wrong pick. You guys are going to be like, all right, well, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, boom, off the board. I'm taking the next best running back. It's going to be like either Christian McCaffrey or Alvin Kamara. And hey, it's like, my hands are tied. What was I supposed to do? I didn't have either of those guys. So I'll hopefully get the number three pick and let you guys make one of the mistakes, and then we can talk about.
Well, it sounds like I'm still getting Derrick Henry at number 4 in this league.
No, I'm not letting him go number 4. Listen, Woody,
if I had to pick, I want the 9th pick.
So you get Josh Allen.
Got him.
I'm gonna keep my secrets to myself, but give me a bottom 4 pick in the first round, and I will win the league.
Oh man!
All right.
We're gonna have that's for sure.
Everyone listening to this, feel free to reach out and try to join this league. Obviously, we got to do it with more than just the 4 of us here. So this league is going down. It will be very exciting to week just share how well I'm doing, beating everybody, and all my amazing.
We're gonna make a side-to-side trophy, boys. So get all these subscribers. If you're listening to this right now, send us a message that you want to get on the fantasy football league. We will write you down. We will get you in the league. We will. We're gonna have some cool stuff going on, and I'm making a trophy. Heck yeah, we're doing stuff.
Yeah, no, we will have a trophy. Yeah. Do I need to send you my address right now so you can send it?
No, I'll keep it right here for now.
And if we get at least 24 of you, including us, to be in a side-to-side league, we can do something really fun. We can have a blue side and a red side, where we have one league over here, one league over there, and then we can do something fun where the 2 champions, their teams, regardless of who's on their teams, we can manually make like a championship match for the grand champion. I think that would be fun. That's something that hasn't been done. And ladies and gentlemen, it's been a great episode. These are your fantasy football award winners, brought to you by the Side to Side Sportscast. And we want you to be on the Sportscast with us. And we want you to call it how you see it, call it how you saw it, call out those who didn't see it how you saw it, represent your team, your players, tell us how you feel about what you're feeling about, and let's do this. It's been fun. We got to run. We out.